What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Dream a Little, the podcast that's all about helping you feel confident about your age play kink so that you can enjoy it with your significant other. I'm your host, Flo, and thank you so much for listening. I know there are so many other podcasts you could be listening to right now, so it just means a lot to me that you're here. You guys are in for a special treat today, and I feel like I say this every time, but this is one of my favorite episodes I've done because I just feel like our guest Ryan is so relatable and down to earth, and I really enjoyed talking to him, and I think you're going to enjoy this episode too. If you didn't already know, I've found someone who I really connect with, and I've been babying him a lot lately. My fiance and I have this agreement that since he doesn't want to play the little role, he lets me role play with other people, which is just awesome. My fiance is just awesome. Anyways, the reason I bring this up is because I've gotten so many requests from you guys asking if I could be your caregiver, and I feel so bad, but I've already got my hands full with this little one right now. The thing is, I really want you to get into a little space and experience what it's like to have a loving caregiver. So I tried creating a caring and sweet mommy roleplay podcast to help get you in a little space, and I just threw it onto Patreon last week, just no expectations. I almost deleted it actually because I wasn't sure if people would like it. And surprisingly, the feedback I got was so positive that I decided to make it a weekly thing. And to be honest, I'm having a lot of fun coming up with the different scenes and recording them. It's actually been a great outlet for my mommy side. And you should know my style of roleplay is very soothing and relaxing. I want to make it feel like you're really here with me in the room, so I talk to you in a very loving way as if you were an actual baby. And this week's audio roleplay episode is all about mommy trying to deal with a fussy little while I'm getting ready for my date. So if you're into that kind of nurturing mommy vibe, you're going to really love those audios. And I'm even going to post a little preview of them that you can find in the show notes of this episode. So if you want to hear what it's all about, all you need to do is go to thelittlelounge.com/132. That's thelittlelounge.com/132. From there, if you like what you hear and you want to hear more, you can just sign up for my Patreon. For just $5 a month, you'll get instant access to all the backlog and all future episodes. Speaking of Patreon, I just want to give a quick shout out to some new supporters of the show. So big thank you to Jeff, Tim, Fran, Sean, Mark, Josh, and Evan. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for joining. It means a lot to me. All right, I'm not going to make you wait any longer. Let's just get started. What's up, Ryan? Welcome to the show.
Hey, hello. How's it going?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well.
I'm really excited to have you on the phone here. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what you identify as within the community?
So I guess I identify as a switch. I've traditionally played around with both roles. Obviously, the ABDL was kind of the first and foremost, but just over the years with partners and stuff, I've definitely identified as a switch.
Okay, cool. So you've gotten a chance to kind of explore a little bit with other people?
Yeah, I would say in my current relationship, the most for sure. But yeah, with previous partner, I was able to explore somewhat, although perhaps we'll get into further in the interview, maybe a little unsuccessfully at times. And other partners that I've had before her, we dabbled, I would say, but not to the level of where I'm now with my current partner, where everything's kind of on the table and it's pretty open, and there's not a lot of guessing games at this point anymore.
That's got to be a good feeling to have everything out in the open.
Yeah. Well, it definitely didn't happen overnight. I'm 32 now, so yeah, I would say in the last couple of years that's definitely started to come through a lot of, I guess, I don't know, the journey, I guess, or the self-reflection and some of the work that I've done just to overcome some of that shame, I guess, around the whole kink.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up because, you've mentioned that you've opened up to more than just your current partner. And I feel like it takes a good amount of confidence to do something like that. It sounds like you have a lot of experience with having this conversation. So you've probably learned quite a bit over the years.
Well, I think when I was younger with one of my girlfriends, for whatever reason, I was able to. It wasn't so much with me being the little, I guess, but I was able to kind of introduce dabbling in diapers and age play with her just through kind of showing her some photos and she thought it'd be cute. So I guess she was kind of open to it. And so we kind of played around with it in that realm. But this was years ago and we didn't really get into too much discussions about it. And I kind of look back now how I was surprised how successful I guess it went. I didn't get into the whole thing about, being a kinkster or anything like that. It was more just, hey, what do you think about this? And, she thought it was kind of a cute look. So we played around with just, diapers and pacifiers and, in a kind of a sexual way, I suppose, more so than in a non-sexual role play setting. But fast forward, I guess, years later to my long-term girlfriend, my ex, and I wouldn't say it was as successful. Perhaps that was just to do with some of the dynamics we had at play. I wasn't really in a role, I guess, in that relationship where I felt like I had a lot of power, or I don't want to say like upper hand or anything like that, but it was definitely more of a subservient role. No kink implied in that. It was just more me being, I guess, a bit more the follower in that relationship. So perhaps that's why it didn't go over as well in that respect, as well as just not being as confident about it at that time.
Okay, I see. Well, I'm really curious to know the first time you opened up, you said you basically just showed her some photos, right? So I'm curious to know what photos were those that you were able to get her on board with it.
It was like just fairly tasteful, more like just pure like ABDL girls, I guess. Just like more tasteful ones. Nothing really to do with many of the darker stuff to do with age play. Just purely, I don't know. I found some cute girls, I guess, around her age or maybe a bit older at the time, and I don't know. She just said it was cute, and we kind of went from there, I guess. I kind of look back at it now, and I didn't think much of it at the time, I guess. But yeah, we definitely dabbled in it, I guess. I don't know how interested she was in it, other than that she was willing to do it, I guess. So it was definitely, I guess, my first experience with like an actual partner.
Yeah, I mean, that's something you don't forget, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
So the second time you're mentioning it was you had a more difficult time, and you mentioned that that partner was a little bit more vanilla. But
hmm
I'm just wondering, did you also approach it a little differently than the first time around, or was it the same?
Yeah, yeah. So I guess, in that respect, it was kind of on me too, because I don't know for whatever reason that maybe at that point in my life, maybe just wasn't going into that relationship with as much confidence. So, and I think I was kind of in that phase of the binge purge, I guess, where I was still harboring a lot of shame about it. So I don't think I had like an awareness at that time that it was going to be something that was going to be with me, basically for my whole life. And I didn't really understand. I think, I was 21, 22 at the time, like kind of when we were starting to get a bit more serious. And I didn't really understand the scope of how the kink intertwined with my sexuality. And I guess I was naive to the fact that I thought it was kind of something I could just push aside. Like I'm sure we hear so many other ABDLs talk about.
Oh yeah, I think we've all tried that at some point, and it works for a little bit, right? It's like it works temporarily until it doesn't anymore, and it comes back.
Yeah. And I've always found with, I guess, my like partners, like, in the initial phases of dating and sex or whatever, it seems to work, but there's obviously all the desires that I had, that eventually weren't being met. And then also just kind of coming to realize like just a part of myself that I was, pushing down basically. So it just made for, I think, a lot of just being like kind of miserable about it for a time. And then I think, I don't know if we're kind of at this question yet, but just when I introduced it to my kind of longer term previous partner, it was kind of in year 2 or 3, and it wasn't really good on my part in the sense that I kind of sprung it on her in kind of a roundabout way, and she obviously wasn't as receptive to it. And I think it was kind of a push pull where she would try some things, and we would get some traction, but it was kind of like one step forward, 2 steps back. There was like a point in time when she, came home with like a block set for me and like a bib and stuff like that. And we had this like staycation at one of the hotels in the city I was living at the time. And it was just it was awesome. And it just seemed to be going in the right direction. But it was shortly after that, like, I don't really think I didn't accept that part of myself fully. And she, in that respect, didn't accept it. So it was kind of a push pull for years. And it wasn't a super like fun experience, I guess. And that's kind of how that went. Yeah.
So it seems like you almost weren't ready for it yourself. And I think that's so interesting that you actually did things like kind of the opposite way than regular or other people that I've talked to on the show, which is you actually got to experience your fantasies, and then the shame came back after that, even after you had experienced them firsthand.
Yeah, I guess, that'd be an accurate way to put it. I guess I never thought about it like that. Yeah, like I mean, I guess it's always been something that, in some respect I've been able to explore. I think back then it was not nearly to the extent that I would have hoped. It was fairly basic, and she wasn't super into it. So maybe that sounds like enough, I guess. But for me, if my partner like doesn't enjoy it and doesn't like it, and I'm feeling like I'm forcing it on her, it just didn't make for like a good dynamic over time. And I think there was like a lot of resentments like that built like both ways, understandably. And I mean, that's obviously not the only reason, but one of the factors for sure as to why we're not together now was that we just couldn't make that part work. So, which was kind of tough because we were pretty good friends in a lot of respects and had fun together in some of the things that we did and got along. And, from the outside, it probably looked like a fairly good relationship, but we couldn't make that part work. And I tried like several times in different ways to do it. And it just didn't happen over time, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like we don't really talk about that much on the show, but when you're with someone who's not into ABDL, it does require a certain level of kind of like selflessness on a vanilla person's part to kind of, engage in these kind of activities that they're not really turned on by. And also a level of honesty. Like, I feel like sometimes partners will be like, okay, and they'll agree to do certain things, but you can just tell that they're not having a good time,
Yeah, that would be a great summary of basically how that went with my ex. Yeah.
It's like they care about you, and so they want to make you happy, but it just feels too forced.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing too was like, obviously I was still harboring a lot of shame about it. So I was kind of seeking her approval as to whether it'd be okay. And looking back now, obviously that's not how that works. I didn't accept it. So she definitely didn't accept it. So that's just kind of how we went for a while. I know now through experience and a lot of work in this arena that it starts with us, and from there we can kind of attract what kind of partner we're looking for at that point.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. So how does that compare to the relationship that you're in right now?
Well, I would say it's polar opposite. So the partner that I have now, I approached it totally different. Like, I actually, like, after I split with my ex, I spent about probably a year and a half to 2 years just single. And I went on some dates with some different girls in that time frame, but I wasn't really, I was more just taking some time for myself. And I ended up getting hooked up with like a men's coach, and I was doing some other work too, but obviously that came up at some point, was my kink and how I was going to reconcile, I guess, the shame around that. And he kind of told me, and this was probably about a year and a half ago, probably a year and a half ago at this point. He's just basically said, well, like, the only reason you can't have what you want is because like you have shame around it, and something about that. just kind of stuck with me. And from there, something about just like telling it to another guy was healing, I guess. And he himself wasn't necessarily a kinkster, but wasn't a stranger to kinky things in the bedroom and things like that. So I think I told him he didn't really bat an eyelash. He just kind of said, "Oh, like I saw something about that on TV, and oh yeah, like if that's your poison, like more power to you or whatever." And that's just kind of how we went from there. So when I started dating my current partner, I think it was like week 3. Keeping in mind, I was still working with this coach at the time and able to kind of get my fears out on the table. And I think I just got to a place where I wasn't necessarily afraid of the relationship continuing, I guess, with my current partner. I mean, we had only been dating 3 weeks, so I didn't have a ton invested. I liked her, but I knew like I had to live like a more authentic self in the relationship moving forward. So I just kind of told her about it, left it with her, and she just kind of thought about it for a week or maybe a week and a half. And I think she had somebody in her life she could confide in, and that person, luckily, I guess, was fairly adept in alternative sexualities or kinks, and I guess I think she says now she just kind of like led with her heart that she wanted to pursue things with me. So from there, it's just kind of worked out in the sense that she's not necessarily a kinkster, but we did some sort of survey from some sort of sexuality podcaster or somebody who does that kind of work, and they had like these surveys or whatever. So we did them just for fun one day. And of course, I'm 75% kinkster and 25% or like 10% vanilla and 10% romantic or something like that. And yeah, so that was my profile. Of like no shocker there, I guess. And just various questions you had to ask about what you like, and there was about 20 questions, and my answers were like pretty obvious as to what the way I would answer. And she took the quiz, and hers came up, I think, like 25-30% kinkster, and I think she was like 25-30% like romantic, and then like 20-30% like vanilla. I can't remember the exact terms, but basically, like if you take like the two circles and like overlap them, like there's some similarities there, like in the middle. So like we have like a baseline to work with, I guess. Like she's not necessarily didn't really know what ABDL or like age play or like power dynamics were per se. But I guess in one of her previous relationships, she had mentioned that with one of her partners, like she had some sort of, I don't think she had a name for it, but where she was maybe more maternal and her partner was maybe more, I don't know what the word would be, little or something like that, but like they didn't have a name for it. And I don't think it was a big thing that they did, but she did say that like she in the past had gotten, bored at times with quote unquote vanilla sex. So I guess it just kind of worked out in that respect. Like we had a really good sexual chemistry before we kind of dove into like, I guess, mommy dom or little role play, or now it's kind of involved at times to daddy dom, little girl, where it's just kind of worked out. I haven't really like forced it. So I guess I'm lucky in that sense. Obviously we had a pretty good sexual chemistry from the start, but as I mentioned before, if it wouldn't have moved beyond that to quote unquote vanilla, I think I wouldn't have been able to stay in that relationship, I guess. So I guess that's been the difference, is that I wasn't willing to compromise moving into this one. Obviously there's other things that, I understand that we're not looking for a unicorn partner or whatever that meets every single fantasy or every single checkbox or whatever. And I obviously myself don't consider myself a unicorn either, but like we've kind of come together and there's been enough overlap that it seemed to work. And, she likes a little bit more romantic, and that's a bit of a challenge for me, but I find if I don't overthink that part, it seems to happen naturally. When I try to go to my way to be romantic and force it, I don't find that it works perfectly well, but that's something we've kind of worked through. And the more we don't really worry about it too much, it seems to just kind of pop up in the mix at times where we're not necessarily indulging in a kinky sexual time, I guess. But I'd say for sure, like obviously I gravitate towards, either being the submissive or switching to the daddy role, I guess.
Well, it seems like you lucked out with having someone who kind of had a similar kind of caregiver little dynamic in her previous relationship, so she didn't think it was too out there. But a couple of things that I really liked about what you just said is, once you broke up with your ex, you took some time to yourself and you even invested in a men's coach, which is really, really cool. And I just wanted to ask you, what inspired you to start doing the coaching?
Well, I had done, back in my previous city, I had done some work with a psychologist. I had struggled a bit with some depression, and I think obviously in retrospect, having this shame and stuff around that played a role. But I think, I've had some previous experiences in childhood in my life that weren't exactly smooth roads as far as how I grew up and stuff like that. So I think some of that stuff just manifested as some depression in later in life. And so I started doing some work with a psychologist 3-4 years ago. And I did bring up the ABDL, and she was pretty cool about it. And she actually had some friends who were Kinksters, and that was kind of the start of it. And then I moved to a new city, took a new job opportunity, kind of started fresh, if you will. And I just started kind of getting connected with some people. I took this cooking class. I was trying to get on a healthier, diet and lifestyle track. And this girl that I had met did some, I guess, women's coach. Well, she did coaching in general, but I think she more like women's coaching. Mm-hmm. And so I just was interested, and I did a couple sessions with her. And she just kind of told me, she's like, I think I need to connect you with this friend of mine or whatever. And so that's when I got connected with this men's coach. And it's kind of been a journey of healing from some past traumatic experiences and also, my kink in the mix. And I've been on this like journey, I guess, through various like healing modalities and a lot of different things that I do to just overcome depression, as well as some anxiety, and then as well as just my sexuality in the mix. So I've just kind of made a decision at some point, maybe a couple years ago, that I was going to figure out how I was going to, not to sound corny or whatever, but to kind of love myself or whatever. Yeah. So from there, not to get all spiritual, but the universe has kind of started to put different people in my path that have kind of helped me on that journey. And obviously, you're never 100% there. I'm not saying shame never creeps up from time to time, but it definitely doesn't have the hold on me that it used to. And it's just kind of the path that I'm on now. And ABDL and Kink has kind of all got sorted out in that mix. I've also, went to some munches in the past, and some ABDL events and all that kind of stuff helps. But I'd say, the traction really started kind of, a couple years ago when I just kind of started going on that new path.
That's so great. I love hearing about, personal development and growing as a person. And it's really helped me as well in the past. I've never worked with, a dating coach personally, but I've listened to different podcasts and things. And I can say it's really helped me as well. And it's really empowering. It sounds like you had a mindset shift this last time when you opened up to your partner you mentioned, thinking maybe this girl will leave me, but I'm not that invested yet. So this is kind of the perfect time to let her know, to like kind of break it to her and just see how it goes. And it seemed like by that point, the big change that you had made was telling yourself, like, no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, I guess that would be the thing, is just to get away from that. I mean, I think the thing too is just to, I think everybody at some point in their life should spend at least a year single and just get comfortable being alone. And obviously you're going to have friends and stuff that you reach out to in that time. But I think that was the biggest thing. I think in the past I was just like fearful to be alone. And then once I was alone, obviously it wasn't great for a time, but I'd say after 6 months or maybe 9 months of being on my own, I started to enjoy aspects of it and just the simplicity of it. And I think I kind of got over that fear of being alone. And obviously, as a relationship progresses and you've got more invested in it, obviously that, could shift a little bit into maybe that creeping up again, that fear. But I think that was really the biggest thing.
I totally agree. And, I don't want to take up too much time with you here, but like I've just been having so much fun. I think we're over time here. But Ryan, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed this episode, hearing about your journey, and I think it'll inspire some people on their journeys as well.
For sure. Thanks, Lo.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, take care.
Bye, you too.